can't live without it, so I just do it. It's like breathing, you know. I get grumpy, I get edgy if I don't do it, so it's a part of myself.
When I come upon some very strange history that wakens my imaginations, that inspires me.
I think that being a writer, you're always trying to gather some kind of information and new approaches to what you're doing, and usually you can learn something from every experience, I think.
The North Seas project is a collaboration between writing agencies here in Newcastle, New Writing North, and sister organisations in Sweden, Iceland and the Faroe Islands. And the aim of the project is to send writers from those countries to other places and look particularly at the sea and rivers and waters generally, and look at the similarities and the differences and the connections.
Well, I'm first and most a poet. I've 16 book of poems behind me, so that's my main field.
I have written 6 books, 2 journalistic pieces and 4 novels, and right now I'm working on my 5th novel.
I've both written fiction and non-fiction. I've also worked in radio, and I've written poetry, and that's kind of my starting point, and that's probably the point which I will always visit again.
The River Tyne has played a very important role in our history and indeed present, and trade has been very important here, and the same applies to Gothenburg in the west of Sweden, and obviously to Iceland and the Faroe Islands. We wanted to show them not just points of interest, but important places in the history of the river as a trading port going back 2,000 years ago.
My family is heavily rooted in the fishing industry in Iceland. There have been so many things that are connected, you know, both directly and indirectly about the way that my family lived, but also just the way that commerce has been done here. Some of it is interlinked with what was happening in Iceland, some of it is more of a world process and so on. But I mean, this just widens the scope of what I've been thinking about and writing about.
I've been reading a lot of fantasy fiction when I was younger, and it's a little bit like being in that fiction because of all the castles and churches and architecture. So that's maybe the biggest or most strange experience, that okay, it really looks like my imagination from these books by Tolkien and Lewis and so forth.
You have harbours and you have water, and I come from a place where I see water just by looking outside the window, so I'm surrounded by water in the middle of the Atlantic. So I think in my poetry water is almost everywhere.
This is very different from what I do from day to day. It's interesting just to meet the other authors and speak to them about their communities and what they are writing about. And then I also think this will be a source of inspiration on various levels. I mean, I'm sure of that.
Isn't it always good to try new things and try to learn new people and try to work in new ways in order to develop? I usually work alone, of course, because I'm a writer, and to work together with other people and travel around with them, and so it's very different from my usual way of working.
And I think this is something that, I mean, you would never do as a tourist, or you would never do it as a local. This is something that is a part, I think, of the local people's here everyday life. They don't see, you know, what's so fascinating about it. I think you maybe need to have a different angle or come in as a foreigner, so to speak.